My name is Alara, and at 34, I stand at the helm of a company born from whispers of doubt and nurtured by sheer will. I never finished college, a fact that for years was the unspoken centerpiece of every family gathering, a ghost that haunted my father's every glance in my direction. My business, the Artisan's Compass, is now valued at over $25 million, a number I kept shielded from the people who should have been my greatest champions. That all came to a halt on the evening of my father's 70th birthday, in a house filled with the scent of pine cleaner and simmering resentment. He called me an embarrassment, a lucky amateur, and asked me to leave. He didn't know that the foundation of the life he so proudly inhabited was mortared with the very money he disdained. The look on his face when he finally understood, weeks later, was a quiet symphony of regret that resonated more deeply than any tear I had ever shed. Our family was carved from the stoic, rain-soaked earth of Port Blossom, Oregon. It was a city of bridges and roses, where ambition was measured in sensible degrees and predictable career trajectories. My father, Arthur, was a civil engineer, a man who believed in blueprints and solid foundations, both in construction and in life. To him, the world was a series of logical problems with prescribed solutions, and the ultimate solution for a successful life was a university degree. My mother, Helen, a librarian, was the quiet echo to his resolute voice, her love a gentle but firm pressure guiding us toward the shelves of convention she so carefully curated. I was different from my siblings, a wildflower in a meticulously planned garden. My brother, Leo, and sister, Claire, were perfect specimens, thriving in the soil of our parents' expectations. They excelled in school, their paths aimed squarely at law and medicine. I, on the other hand, was a dreamer, a tinkerer. While other children were playing tag, I was collecting smooth, gray stones from the Willamette River, polishing them for hours, and selling them in small, hand-painted velvet bags to tourists downtown. At 14, I taught myself basic coding not for a school project, but to build a website cataloging the rare books in my mother's library, complete with a trading forum for local collectors. My parents saw these endeavors as quaint distractions. Alara needs to apply that creativity to her calculus homework. My father would state over dinner, his fork pausing midair. These little games won't build a future. High school was a landscape I navigated with a sense of deep alienation. I did just enough to pass, but my real education came from books on behavioral economics and biographies of people who had built empires from ideas. While Leo was captain of the debate team and Claire was volunteering at the hospital to pad her pre-med applications, I launched a small online service designing custom logos for other teenagers' blogs and gaming channels. I made $3,000 by graduation, a sum that felt like a fortune, a tangible proof of concept that my parents dismissed as internet funny money. Their disappointment solidified when I announced my decision to leave community college after a single, soul-crushing semester. The business courses felt like historical reenactments, taught by professors who spoke of market forces as if they were distant weather patterns, not living, breathing things to be understood and navigated. The argument that followed my announcement was a storm that lasted for days. "You are throwing your life away," my father's voice boomed, the sound rattling the glass in our kitchen cabinets. "No daughter of mine will be a dropout, drifting from one menial job to the next." "This isn't about drifting, Dad," I pleaded. "It's about building." But he couldn't see it. In his world, you followed the blueprint. You didn't draw your own. I moved out at 19 with $2,000 and a stubborn fire in my heart. My first apartment was a cramped studio in a part of town where the streetlights flickered and the scent of damp pavement never quite left the air. I subsisted on instant noodles and day-old bread, pouring every ounce of my energy and scant resources into an 18-hour workday. My first 3 attempts at a business were spectacular failures. A subscription box for local coffee roasters fizzled when I couldn't manage the logistics. A service offering custom travel itineraries collapsed under the weight of my own disorganization. An attempt to sell vintage clothing online was swallowed by bigger, more established competitors. Each failure was a brutal, private lesson. I learned about inventory management by having my tiny living space overflowing with unsellable products. I learned the necessity of ironclad contracts after a client refused to pay for weeks of work. I learned that passion without process was just a hobby. These were lessons etched into my psyche, far more indelible than anything a textbook could have offered. The turning point arrived in the form of Isabel, a woman I met at a small business fair held in a drafty community hall. She was 20 years my senior, the owner of a renowned art gallery downtown, with a quiet confidence that was as elegant as the sculptures she sold. She listened to my story of failures not with pity, but with a knowing smile. She saw a spark in me that my own family had only ever tried to extinguish. Education is not a single path, but a landscape you explore, she told me over coffee a week later, her gaze steady and kind. Some of the most brilliant people I know learned by charting their own territory, not by following someone else's map. Isabel became my mentor, my compass. With her guidance, I found my true north. At 22, I launched the Artisan's Compass. The concept was simple but powerful, a curated e-commerce platform that connected independent artisans from the Pacific Northwest, woodworkers, weavers, potters, glassblowers, with a national audience that craved authentic, handcrafted goods. The timing was serendipitous, catching the rising tide of a movement toward supporting local creators and sustainable products. The early days were a blur of sacrifice. My desk was a plank of wood laid over 2 filing cabinets, and my bed was a futon that I folded up each morning to make room for packing boxes. I was the web developer, the customer service department, the marketing team, and the shipping clerk. I worked from the quiet pre-dawn hours until long after the city had gone to sleep. The breakthrough came 9 months in. A prominent design blogger discovered a set of hand-carved kitchen utensils from one of our Oregon woodworkers and featured them in a holiday gift guide. The effect was immediate and seismic. Orders poured in, crashing my rudimentary website. For 72 hours, I didn't sleep, fueled by adrenaline and black coffee, working with a freelance developer to get the site back online while personally emailing every single customer to apologize for the delay. That one blog post generated nearly $15,000 in revenue. It was more money than I had ever seen. I called my parents, my voice buzzing with an excitement I couldn't contain. My father's response was a familiar dose of lukewarm caution. "That's nice, dear, but it's likely a fluke. You know, you can always re-enroll in classes when this little venture runs its course." His words were a small, sharp pain, but they were also fuel. I would not prove him wrong with words. I would prove him wrong with the quiet, undeniable weight of success. The next 10 years were a montage of relentless work and exponential growth. The Artisan's Compass blossomed beyond my wildest dreams. We grew from a handful of Oregon-based creators to a network of over 500 artisans across the country, each one with a story, a craft, and a small business we were helping to sustain. Every stage of our expansion presented a new, formidable challenge. When a major shipping partner went on strike right before Christmas, threatening to derail our busiest season, I personally rented a fleet of vans and mobilized a temporary team of local college students, driving packages to distribution centers myself to ensure our customers received their gifts on time. When a corporate giant launched a competing platform and tried to poach our top artisans, I didn't send emails or offer empty promises. I flew to meet with our key partners in person, from a weaver in rural Vermont to a silversmith in Santa Fe, listening to their needs and restructuring our commission model to be the most artist-friendly in the industry. The leanest time came in year 3, when a cash flow crisis nearly suffocated us. We were growing too quickly, and our capital couldn't keep pace with our inventory needs. I didn't take a salary for 6 months, sold my car, and negotiated extended payment terms with our suppliers, my voice shaking on calls as I asked for their trust. Those months taught me a level of financial discipline that became the bedrock of our company's stability. The milestones began to accumulate. We opened our first office, a beautiful converted warehouse space in the Pearl District, and I hired my first employees. Crossing the $1 million revenue mark was a quiet moment I celebrated alone in my office with a single, perfect glass of champagne after everyone else had gone home. Throughout this entire journey, I kept the true scale of my success a secret from my family. They knew I had my website business and that it was doing okay. I let them believe that. Their initial skepticism had built a wall between us, and a part of me, the part that was still that 19-year-old girl seeking approval, kept hoping they would one day ask the right questions, show genuine curiosity. They never did. Despite their emotional distance, I was their silent safety net. When my mother needed emergency heart surgery, I anonymously paid the $80,000 portion not covered by their insurance. My father spoke with relief about a generous hospital grant they'd received, never once suspecting its origin. When my brother, Leo, wanted to buy a historic craftsman home but was $50,000 short on the down payment, I funneled the money to him through a trust, framing it as an obscure family inheritance. He accepted it without question, yet still lectured me about the importance of a real job with a pension plan at Thanksgiving dinner. My sister, Claire, had always dreamed of a lavish wedding in the Oregon wine country. When her fiancé lost his job months before the date, I covered the $60,000 shortfall for the venue and catering. Claire knew the money came from me, but at family functions, she'd refer to it with a dismissive wave of her hand. Ilara's little online shop had a good quarter, so she helped out a bit. This chasm between my reality and their perception of it became a source of quiet, constant pain. By day, I was a CEO, leading a team of 45 people, negotiating multi-million-dollar partnerships, and shaping the future of American craft. By night, in texts and phone calls with my family, I was still the wayward daughter who got lucky with an internet thing. Our headquarters now occupied 2 full floors of a downtown office building. A feature in Forbes had brought investor attention, and our recent valuation had landed at a staggering $25 million. I had turned down 3 acquisition offers, fiercely protective of the company's soul and the artisans who depended on us. As my father's 70th birthday approached, I made a resolution. It was time. It was time to gently pull back the curtain, not to boast, but to finally bridge the gap, to be seen for who I had become. I created a substantial, fully funded retirement portfolio for them, a gift that would ensure their comfort for the rest of their lives. I would present it to them at the dinner, along with the truth. I was no longer an insecure girl begging for a pat on the head. I was a founder, a leader, a woman who had built something of meaning and value. Surely, that would be enough. Surely, that would finally earn their respect. I could not have been more tragically mistaken. The night of my father's 70th birthday felt heavy with unspoken history. Their house, the one I grew up in, was a time capsule of beige carpets and oak furniture. The only new object of note was a massive, wall-mounted television, a gift from Leo the previous Christmas, which he'd mentioned was a small token of his success as a corporate lawyer. My mother greeted me with her customary hug, a brief, fragile embrace that smelled of lavender soap. "You look well, Ilara. Is that a new jacket?" It was 3 years old. Leo arrived with his wife, both exuding an aura of polished achievement. Claire and her husband followed, and Claire immediately began regaling the room with news of a recent promotion at her medical practice. "They're grooming me for department head," she announced, her voice bright with self-satisfaction. "Youngest one in the hospital's history, if it happens." Throughout the small talk, my life remained an unexamined territory. When Claire's husband mentioned an article he'd read about the boom in e-commerce, Leo deftly pivoted the conversation to his son's soccer team. It was a masterful, almost invisible deflection. Dinner was my mother's pot roast, served on the wedding china that only emerged for milestone occasions. My father, seated at the head of the table, presided over the meal like a benevolent king, accepting praise and toasts with practiced humility. As dessert, a Black Forest cake my mother had made from scratch was served. I knew it was time. I had waded through anecdotes about neighborhood developments, Claire's upcoming trip to Italy, and Leo's detailed account of a recent courtroom victory. Not one person had asked me a single question about my work. "Dad, Mom, everyone," I began, my voice steadier than my racing heart. "I wanted to share something with you all. Some news about my company." My father nodded, his attention already drifting toward the cake. "The Artisan's Compass," I continued, my voice clear and measured, was recently valued at $25 million. We were featured in Forbes last month. A profound silence descended upon the table. It was thick and suffocating. My mother's hand, holding her dessert fork, froze in midair. Claire and Leo exchanged a look I couldn't decipher. My father was the first to speak, his tone laced with a familiar, weary skepticism. And what does that mean exactly, Alara? These internet companies, they use all sorts of funny math for those valuations. I held his gaze, refusing to be rattled. I explained our revenue streams, our profit margins, our growth trajectory. I talked about our 45 employees, the health insurance and retirement benefits we provided. I spoke of the 500 American artisans whose livelihoods were intertwined with our success. Leo cut me off. So, you caught a lucky break with this online fad. That's great. But some of us have been building real careers, with qualifications and a foundation. He stressed the word qualifications, looking to his father for approval. It isn't luck, Leo, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's a decade of 18-hour days. It's solving logistical nightmares at 3 a.m. It's building something that supports hundreds of other small businesses. My mother finally found her voice. It does sound wonderful, dear. Though I do still wish you'd finished your degree. And education is so important, no matter what. My patience was fraying into a fine, sharp thread. I pressed on. Actually, speaking of the future, I have something for you, Dad. I slid a handsome leather-bound folder across the table. It contained the documents for the retirement portfolio I had established for them. I wanted to make sure you and Mom have everything you need to retire without a single worry. My father opened the folder. His expression shifted from confusion to a dark, gathering storm. It wasn't gratitude that flushed his cheeks. It was a deep, visceral anger. "What is this?" he said, his voice low and tight. He dropped the folder onto the table as if it were contaminated. "Is this some kind of handout? We don't need your charity." "It's not charity, Dad," I tried to explain, my composure beginning to crack. "It's a gift. The same way I wanted to help with Mom's surgery and Leo's house and Claire's wedding." 3 heads snapped toward me. The silence was no longer just thick, it was electric with shock and betrayal. My secret generosity was laid bare under the harsh light of the dining room chandelier. "You," my father sputtered, his face turning a blotchy red. "That was you." Claire looked mortified. Leo's face hardened into a mask of pure resentment. My mother just stared, her mouth slightly agape. "You've been going behind our backs," my father's voice rose, trembling with rage. "Playing the big shot with your internet money?" "I was just trying to help," I whispered, my voice shrinking. "I never wanted any credit. I just love you all." "Love?" Leo scoffed. "You mean making us feel like your personal charity projects? Some of us have pride, Alara. We earn our way with real degrees and honest work, not by getting rich off some website." "It's not some website," I insisted, the spiral pulling me down faster than I could fight it. "It's a real company. We provide jobs. We support American craft." My father stood up so abruptly his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. His napkin fluttered to the ground. "You drop out of college, you ignore every piece of advice I've ever given you, and now you swan in here, throwing your money around as if you know better than all of us." "That's not what I was doing," I pleaded, my eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. "You think your money makes you a success," he thundered, his voice now a full-throated roar. "You have no foundation, no discipline. You're still just a college dropout with a lucky hobby. You're an embarrassment to this family's name." The word hung in the air, embarrassment. My mother gasped, a tiny, useless sound. Leo looked down, a flicker of a smirk on his lips. Claire stared at her hands, her expression a battle between shame and agreement. "Arthur," my mother finally whispered, far too late. "No," my father barreled on, his face contorted with a lifetime of rigid pride. "I worked my whole life the right way. I got an education. I built a respectable career. I raised a family with standards. I will not be patronized in my own home by my dropout daughter." Slowly, I rose to my feet, my movements stiff and robotic. I picked up my purse. "I should go." "Yes, you should," he spat, his eyes cold and hard. "Get out of my house. Your money doesn't make you one of us." The finality of his words was absolute. I looked from my father's furious face to my mother's tear-streaked one, to my brother's smugness and my sister's conflict. There was no ally at this table. No one to say enough. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said, the words tasting like ash. I walked to the door, my back straight, my every movement fueled by a desperate need for dignity. No one said a word. No one followed. The moment I closed the door of my car, the composure shattered. A ragged sob tore from my throat, and my hands shook so violently I couldn't fit the key into the ignition. As I finally pulled away from the curb, the familiar lines of my childhood home blurring through a thick film of tears, I felt something fundamental fracture inside me, a clean, irreparable break. The drive back to my hotel was a watercolor of smeared headlights and grief. I checked into the sterile, impersonal room and collapsed onto the bed, the evening's events playing on a torturous loop in my mind. Had I been arrogant? Had I been naive to think a financial statement could mend a lifetime of perceived failure? All the years of quiet support, of anonymous gifts given from a place of love, now felt like a fool's errand, a desperate attempt to buy the respect I could never seem to earn. I opened my laptop, a grim sort of accounting compulsion taking over. I documented every dollar. The $80,000 for my mother's surgery. The $50,000 for Leo's down payment. The $60,000 for Claire's wedding. And the smaller things, the $2,500 for my father's car transmission, the $5,000 for my mother's new garden landscape, the countless gifts and loans that were never meant to be repaid. The total stared back at me from the screen, over $200,000, not including the retirement portfolio he had rejected with such contempt. Around midnight, a text from Claire lit up my phone. "Dad's still worked up, but he'll cool down. You know how he is about his principles." No apology. No defense of me. Just the implicit expectation that I should absorb the venom and return to my designated place in the family hierarchy. I deleted it without responding. The next morning, my first call was to a therapist whose name Isabel had given me months ago. Dr. Anya Sharma agreed to a virtual session that afternoon. Wounds inflicted by family, especially when they target our deepest insecurities, are the most difficult to heal, she said, her voice a calm anchor in my storm. Over the next few days, she helped me begin to untangle the knotted threads of my family's dynamics. My success hadn't just surprised them, it had threatened the very foundation of my father's worldview and the established order of the family. My financial aid, intended as love, had been received as an affront, a subversion of his role as the patriarch and provider. A week after the dinner, a voicemail from Leo appeared. "Elara, this has gone on long enough. Family is family. Let's all just move on." Again, no apology. Just a command to forget, to forgive without acknowledgement. 2 weeks after that night, sitting in the quiet of my hotel room, looking out at the gray port blossom sky, I made the most terrifying and liberating decision of my life. I was done. Done seeking approval, done shrinking myself, done pretending. The small, art-filled cottage I had purchased in Carmel by the Sea the year before, a place I saw as a future retreat, would become my present. It would become my home. Before I left, I wrote one last letter to my parents. It was not angry. It was honest. "Dear Mom and Dad, for my entire adult life, I have been quietly seeking your respect. I built a company from nothing, creating jobs and supporting American artisans, all while hiding the scale of my success so as not to make anyone uncomfortable. I supported our family through crises, never wanting recognition, only to offer help from a place of love. The other night, when Dad called me an embarrassment and told me I wasn't part of the family, it was not a misunderstanding. It was a clarification. It showed me that in your eyes, I will always be the college dropout, and no amount of success on my own terms will ever change that. I cannot continue to exist in a relationship where my worth is contingent on a piece of paper I chose not to pursue. I will always love you. But for my own well-being, I need to create a space for myself built on respect, not obligation. I hope that one day, we can find a way to build a new bridge between us, one founded on who I am, not who you wanted me to be. Love, Elara." I mailed the letter myself. There was no reply. With the help of my incredible executive assistant, I arranged for my life in Oregon to be packed up. I asked her to donate most of it. I wanted a fresh start, free of baggage, both literal and emotional. As the plane ascended, banking south over the familiar green landscape, I felt a profound sense of grief giving way to a fragile, unfamiliar feeling of freedom. The family I had tried so desperately to please was now behind me. But so was the crushing weight of their expectations. Carmel by the Sea greeted me not as a fugitive, but as a pilgrim. The air, crisp with salt and cypress, felt like a cleansing breath. My cottage, nestled on a quiet lane a short walk from the sea, was small but perfect, with large windows that flooded the rooms with the soft, coastal light. I had bought it on a whim, furnished it with a designer's help, but had only spent a handful of nights there. It felt like a beautiful empty stage. Making it a home became my therapy. I replaced the generic, high-end furniture with unique pieces from the artisan's compass. A hand-carved rocking chair from a woodworker in Appalachia. A magnificent, hand-dyed wool tapestry from a weaver in New Mexico. Intricate, hand-blown glass vases from a studio in Seattle. Each object was a testament to the world I had built, a world of creativity, resilience, and beauty. My days fell into a new rhythm. I began each morning with a walk on the beach, my bare feet on the cool, damp sand, watching the sea otters play in the kelp beds. I found a small, family-owned bakery where the owner, Maria, learned my name and my order, black coffee and an almond croissant, by my third visit. Running my company remotely was surprisingly seamless. My team, which I had built with such care over the years, was more than capable. Freed from the daily stress of the office and the unspoken weight of my family drama, my mind felt clearer, my decisions sharper. My leadership team flew down for a strategy retreat a month after I moved. "You seem different," Alara, my COO Marcus, noted as we sat on my stone patio. "More grounded." He was right. Without the constant, subconscious need for my father's approval, my own instincts felt more trustworthy, more solid beneath my feet. I began to build a community. I befriended the owner of a local art gallery, a woman named Genevieve, who introduced me to a circle of fiercely intelligent, creative women. We met for dinner once a week, our conversations a vibrant tapestry of art, politics, business, and laughter. They were fascinated by my story, not because I was a dropout, but because I was a founder. They saw my path not as a deficiency, but as a strength. The past tried to intrude, of course. 3 weeks into my new life, Leo appeared on my doorstep unannounced. He looked jarringly out of place in his expensive suit, a stark slash of corporate gray against the riot of color in my garden. "Wow. Nice little getaway," he said, his eyes scanning the property with a practiced, assessing gaze. He got straight to the point. He was part of an investment group buying a commercial property and needed a short-term loan to secure his place. He was sure the return would be massive. The old Alara would have felt a pang of guilt, a pull of familial duty. The new Alara felt nothing but a cool, calm clarity. "I'm no longer making loans to family, Leo," I said, my voice even. "That part of my life is over." His charming facade dissolved. "So that's it? You hide away in your little beach house and cut off the people who raised you? Dad was right about you. This money has made you selfish." Dad called me an embarrassment and threw me out of his house, I reminded him gently. "You stood there and said nothing. This isn't about selfishness, Leo. It's about self-preservation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I was just about to take my dog for a walk." I had adopted a scruffy terrier mix from the local shelter, a little soul named Barnaby whose unconditional, joyous affection was a daily balm. Showing my brother the door, with Barnaby yapping at my heels, felt like a quiet, profound victory. That night, I called my lawyer and set up the Phoenix Grant for Unconventional Minds, a scholarship and mentorship program at my old community college. Designed specifically for students who showed entrepreneurial promise outside of traditional academic metrics. It was my way of rewriting my own story, turning a source of shame into a source of opportunity for others. Weeks turned into months. My cottage became a sanctuary. My garden bloomed. I was healing. The pain of my family's rejection hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape. It was no longer a gaping wound, but a scar, a reminder of a battle fought and survived. Then, the world tilted. The Monterey Life magazine ran a feature on local entrepreneurs making a national impact. There I was, on the cover, photographed in my garden, smiling. The article was a deep dive into the artisan's compass, detailing our growth, our $25 million valuation, our commitment to American craft, and my newly established foundation. It was picked up by a national wire service. Suddenly, my story was everywhere. The first ripple was a tidal wave of friend requests on social media from distant cousins and old high school classmates. The second was a text from my mother. "We saw the article about you. So wonderful. Your father and I are so incredibly proud." Proud. The word felt hollow, opportunistic. It was followed by a voicemail from my father, his voice slick with a forced joviality. "Alara, just saw the news. Wonderful stuff. I always knew you had it in you. Listen, there seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding that night. Give your old dad a call." A misunderstanding. That's what he called it. 3 days later, my mother texted again. "We're thinking of coming to California next month. We would love to see your new home." The request landed like a lead weight in my stomach. After all this, they wanted to walk back into my life, drawn not by remorse, but by the undeniable glow of public validation. I spoke to Dr. Sharma. "This is your decision, Alara," she said. "You hold the power now. You get to set the terms of engagement." After a day of quiet contemplation, walking on the beach with Barnaby, I texted my mother back. "You are welcome to visit. But first, we need to have a real, honest conversation about what was said on Dad's birthday. We can't move forward by pretending it didn't happen." Her reply was instant. "Of course, dear. We just want to be a family again." The visit was scheduled. I booked them a room at a charming inn down the street, keeping my cottage as my sanctuary. I met them for lunch at a restaurant overlooking the ocean, a neutral, public space. They looked older, smaller than I remembered, dwarfed by the vastness of the Pacific. "You've done very well for yourself, Alara," my father said, after an awkward silence. The "for yourself" was subtle, but it was there, the implication of a success achieved in defiance of them. "Thank you," I said, and waited. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "About my birthday. I was caught off guard by your news. I may have overreacted." It wasn't an apology. It was an excuse. "You called me an embarrassment," I said, my voice soft but unyielding. "You told me to get out of your house. I need to understand why." "It felt like you were showing off," my mother chimed in. "Like your success made you better than us." "I hid my success for a decade to avoid that very feeling," I replied. "I helped this family from a place of love. And I was thrown out for it." The conversation was a slow, painful excavation of years of resentment and misunderstanding. There was no single moment of breakthrough, no tearful catharsis. But as the meal ended, I knew what I had to do. "I will show you my home," I said. "But I need you to see it not just as a collection of nice things, but as the result of a decade of work you refused to respect." As I walked them through my cottage, pointing out the art, the furniture, the tangible results of my labor, I saw the look on my father's face. It was a complex cocktail of awe, confusion, and deep, aching regret. He was standing inside the evidence that his blueprint for life was not the only one. The $25 million valuation was no longer funny internet math. It was the sun-drenched room he was standing in, the view of the endless ocean, the undeniable substance of a life he had completely misjudged. And in that moment, watching his carefully constructed world of certainties begin to crumble, I realized something profound. His approval, the thing I had craved for so long, no longer had any power over me. I was already whole. The conversation that evening on my patio, as the sun melted into the Pacific, was the most honest one my family has ever had. "I am sorry," my father said, the words sounding foreign and stiff on his tongue. "For what I said. It was wrong. It was a beginning, not an ending. An apology born of confrontation with undeniable proof, perhaps more than a true change of heart, but it was a start." "What hurt most, Dad," I replied, was the feeling that my entire life's work meant nothing to you because it didn't fit your definition of success. My mother reached a hand across the table. We were scared for you, Alara. The world we knew had rules. A degree, a safe job. You went off the map. We didn't know how to follow. We talked for hours. There was no grand reconciliation. Decades of ingrained belief don't vanish in a single sunset. But we left the conversation with a fragile truce, an agreement to try and build a new relationship based on new terms. My terms. In the years since, our connection has been a slow, careful dance. The phone calls are more frequent, the questions about my work more genuine. My relationship with Claire has warmed, rooted in a newfound, adult respect. Leo remains distant. The boundaries I drew that day remain firm. My life is here, in Carmel. It is a life of my own making. My chosen family of friends has become my true north. The Phoenix Grant is thriving, helping young, unconventional minds find their own paths. And the Artisan's Compass continues to grow, a testament to the idea that success can be built on a foundation of creativity, community, and courage. I learned that forgiveness is not about erasing the past or absolving others. It's an internal act of letting go of the anger that weighs you down, while still honoring the lessons the pain taught you. It's about building fences where they are needed to protect the garden you've worked so hard to cultivate. My story is not one of revenge, but of reclamation. Of reclaiming my worth from the opinions of others. Of realizing that the most important approval you will ever receive is your own. The family we are born into gives us our roots, but sometimes, the family we choose to build is what allows us to truly blossom.